Welcome to another episode of the Trees and Lines podcast. Today we talked to Shawn Huff, Supervisor of Vegetation Management at Oklahoma Gas and Electric. We had a great conversation with Shawn around the use of his herbicide first approach. They're capitalizing much of their vegetation management work and his commitment to developing the next generation. Have a listen. Hope you enjoy. Well, on today's edition of Trees and Lines, we're welcoming Shawn Huff, Oklahoma Gas and Electric. Welcome, Shawn.
Welcome, Shawn.
Appreciate your joining us.
Yeah, it's nice to be here.
Yeah. Shawn, we like to start off by letting you do your self-introduction. Tell us a little bit about who you are, a little bit about your program.
Okay, well, a little bit about me. I originally got into this industry back in 97, 98, working on a tree crew and in the rural areas of Iowa, and just kind of worked my way up from groundman into foreman into all these various avenues that we would have to go through in order to make our way up. From that company, moved around a lot across the upper Midwest, Iowa, Nebraska, Illinois, Kansas, then moved to Texas and spent some time in Texas, and then switched companies a little bit. So I went from the tree side of things over to the consulting side of things. So more of the contracted arborists, those kind of things. Did that with DRG for about 4 years, and then came to OG&E back in 2019 as a supervisor of vegetation management here. And I've learned a lot about IOUs and how we operate here. Versus the way I thought they used to operate. So moved around quite a bit. And it's been an exciting journey over the last 25, 26 years. So,
Shawn, I'll give you a piece of trivia. So This is a few decades. I don't know the date off the top of my head, but you know that most of the industry, the people that are in your type of position, were at one time a consulting utility forester. Well, decades ago, the very first consulting utility forester in the nation was at Oklahoma Gas and Electric.
Really?
Yeah, Dennis Holowinski working on a problem with OG&E, and that was the solution. And from there on, you know where we are today, thousands of them across the country.
Absolutely. That's phenomenal. That's good to be a part of history, I guess.
Yeah, well, there you go. So you were a speaker at Trees and Utilities.
Yes,
a financial mosaic of UVM. Is that did I get that right? Yeah. So
that's correct.
Tell us what your talk was about and give us a recap.
Let's start with the topic or the title of it. And for me, it really represents the way we can go about funding our departments, because there's no department out there no vegetation department out there that's fully funded. There's always avenues to where we could use more money. If you talk to any vegetation supervisor manager, they're going to say, if you gave me X number of dollars, I know exactly how I'm going to spend it on top of what we already have, right? Because she's always in the back of their head with, if I only had this or if I only had that. And as we approached the problems here at OG&E that we were facing, budget was a big part of that. And so how do we maximize the dollars that we're spending all across the board in every different aspect of our company? So we started looking at, what are we doing on the project management side of things? What are we doing on every person that calls us up and says, we need a tree crew? What are they doing? And then how can I absolutely maximize my opportunity for capital spend on those areas? And so that's where we came up with the after the fact things, where a lineman's going to go out there and he's going to replace a pole, or he's going to replace a cutout, insulators, whatever. There's a lot of times that they're doing capital work, things we consider capital work, never called us for any kind of tree work, but we can go out there and assess it and say, well, this was a capital work point. There is vegetation that can be done here. So we're going to go ahead and do this vegetation work as a part of that capital asset improvement. And that really kind of changed some of our vision and some of our thought processes in how can we do this. So we started going down that rabbit trail a little bit further, developed up our standards. We originally we just had guidelines, best management practices, whatever you want to call them, but it wasn't the way the construction side sees things. Construction side goes, hey, we've got a standard, a construction standard that says this cross arm has to be this high, has to be this wide. You can't build anything this close, so on and so forth. And it's non-negotiable. So from that perspective, we said, well, we should have vegetation standards that are non-negotiable internally to say, we're going to set this right away to like new condition. And here's the standards in which we're going to do that. So we wrote standards, and it's the removal standards, and how far back we're able to remove based on easements and those kind of things, and the regrowth rates, all of that factors into there. But we called them standards. So we take this to our construction group, and we said, okay, you want an estimate for vegetation work? Here's our standards, just so you know. So we're going to provide you the estimate for that work for this capital project based on these standards. And it allowed us to get a whole lot more done, a lot more vegetation done, because before we were focused solely on what we needed to do to get the work done, not what we could get done or what we should be doing. And that's where I think it really it flipped the switch for them on the project management side to understand what we were capable of getting done. It did. I mean, nobody wants to talk about this, but it does increase prices a little bit on some of the capital projects. But that's a necessary cost if I'm not going to get any more O&M spend. And so this is the balancing act we're going to do. So capital being reimbursable, being something we can get our return on. O&M is not, where that's just straight expense. We're able to make the argument internally that let's spend more on the capital side, but let's do it in a manner that's going to help reliability. So every capital project that comes to us, whether it's DOT projects, new customer projects, we have our long-term sustainability projects or system integrity stuff, DLRP being one of them, which is the distribution line reliability program, our grid modernization. So we're putting in all the smart meters. Now we're putting in automatic interrupters, things that'll make the system more autonomous. All of those projects now are geared towards our vegetation cycle plan, meaning the circuits they're going to do the work on are the same circuits we're going to do our work on. And so now we're really starting to say, okay, I can capitalize 30% of this circuit because we're going to do this work at the same time we're going to do our cycle work. And it's given us an opportunity to have a broader impact on our system reliability and our maintenance without blowing up the O&M spend.
Yeah, everybody talks about how do we capitalize, and it sounds like you've figured it out.
So Shawn, just kind of digging into that a little bit. First of all, congrats. Like that's a bit of an undertaking when it comes to money. It's always a complicated thing. I think what I'm interested in is how long did it take you to, where you had this idea from the inception of like, hey, this is a way we can be more effective to secure dollars and have bigger impact, to getting it to a place where it's executing, dollars have been transferred, and you're part of the process. What was that timeline like?
It was 2 years.
Okay.
Probably.
And so I know this, right? Because in the nature of the work that we do and how we kind of operate, but let's talk about the stakeholders, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure there were several different groups that you had to kind of bring together and, present the idea, show the quantification of things. Like, can you maybe kind of paint a picture of like where the conversation started, who they started with, and along the path, how you were able to get consensus?
Yeah. And I'm not sure we're 100% in consensus right now, but it all started off with
big word, yeah.
Uh, communicating with legal to understand and finance. So our accounting department and our legal department, once you start redefining capital work, you need to make sure that they're signed off on that. You can't move forward unless our accounting department is comfortable because of what is it, X-Harbin or the Enron situations that all happens. Everybody gets very concerned about how we're identifying capital work. So once we have those conversations, told our story there, then we could go to project management because it was about an engineering, getting us involved early, not when the line crews are there and now they need a tree crew. So that took a lot of time to get with our project management group to work out the workflow on when vegetation needs to be involved. And once they start looking for estimates on their work on the construction side, we need to know that so that we're there getting a vegetation estimate so that they can plug that in. Because what they do, they take those estimates and they request the money through an AFE internally, and it gets approved. Now, once it's approved, they get really frustrated if you go over that estimate. So we had a learning process there of saying, well, we would give them an estimate after they put in a dollar amount that was approved, and our estimate was way different than what, or the actual was way different than what their estimate was. So we said, get us in early. So now we have work planners, cuffs, that'll go out there and look at the work and put a price on it. And then we can get that AFE approved. And if we go over that, that's on us. Like, that's our fault now. So we were able to kind of figure that process out a little bit and get better at estimates. So between project management and engineering, getting us in early, and they love their workflows. So learning how to put together a good Visio workflow for them to say, this makes sense to put us in here. That was a process. It took a lot of conversations.
Is the culture at the utility, at this particular utility, is vegetation management, do they have a strong voice and a big seat at the table? Or is that something in your tenure there you've had to champion? Or did you come into an environment where it wasn't, even though there was dollar movement you had to kind of tighten up, culturally people were, equipped to hear a vegetation management voice?
I can tell you, when I got here, they were not. We were very siloed. And through, for many reasons, multiple reasons about why, but and this is the discussion we hear a lot now, previous to some changes that happened in my upline, nobody knew what happened inside vegetation management. So they would send in a request for work and we would get it and we would either do it or not do it. And we would just let them know afterwards. And that whole workflow or process that we had, they had no idea about. They didn't know the struggle that we had, the problems we have with customers and the PR stuff. And they didn't know that. They just needed their trees trimmed. So we opened up the department in order to get our goals met. We had to tell people we have problems, right? We have struggles. Help us solve these problems. And so once they started getting involved and knowledgeable about the things that we're doing out here or trying to accomplish, it then became, okay, how can I help you? They still want to get their stuff done on their timelines and stuff, but rather than becoming combative, we explain to them, help us help you. We're a service department. We serve internal customers. And so in order to better do that, we needed to open it up and help them. It was being vulnerable as a department, because you are opening yourselves up to scrutiny to people who don't quite understand vegetation management. And there's a lot of nuance to our jobs. And that's something that's very undervalued internally. Engineers, God loves them too, but they don't like nuance. They want hard numbers and hard structure, and it's hard for us to do that.
So how is your new spec, or the scope of work, different than it used to be for capital projects? You go beyond just simple pruning and removing of trees, I assume.
We don't go beyond anything that the industry standard has, but what we said was we're going to do this. So before, it would be, I only need to trim 3 trees in this span to get this pole set. But now, instead of just trimming those 3 trees, we're going to get everything in those 2 spans surrounding that pole replacement, so to speak. So it could be 10 removals and 5 trims that we need to do the entire span. And that's what we're going to do versus just doing what's necessary to set the pole. And that was the biggest change, because exponentially, that's a lot more work than just what's needed for the lineman to drive his backyard dolly back there to set the pole. But on scope of things, when you look at, we were able to get in 2022, we got almost 300 miles trimmed on capital dollars that we would not have otherwise. And that's significant.
Shawn, just to contextualize for the audience so they get a comparative understanding of how big OG&E is, can you share with us maybe like a range of like an annual budget, size of your team? And just for clarity, are you over both transmission and distribution? Are you one or the other?
Yeah, so OG&E has about approximately 21,000 distribution miles. We have approximately 6,000 transmission miles, and I think 1,500 of those are NERC lines. So we have 2 supervisors, one on transmission and facilities, and then I cover all of the distribution work. I originally, when I first landed at OG&E, I was on transmission and facilities. So I got to spend just over a year and a half working solely with that group. And that was very educational, and it was helpful. Then through, people coming and going, I transitioned over to distribution. And so now I have all of that.
Are you a $50 million program? Are you a $20 million program? Are you $100 million? Like, where
on the O&M side or on the capital side?
Maybe you can, break it down for us.
We're significantly more on the capital side. I would say somewhere north of $80 million of capital work that we do. A third of that on the O&M side, without giving specific dollars. Nobody's gonna.
Yeah. No. It's more just I think what helps, in this forum, where we've tried to create a community of discussion across the industry, I think it does help, peer-like utilities, young people that are building their career to understand there's a lot of money floating around, and that money has to be sort of managed in a Tetris-like fashion, because there's a million different things to get done, from clearing to herbicide work to all that kind of stuff. So I think it just helps kind of give that framework. When you're talking about, I have to go grab dollars, what are we talking about? So I think that's super helpful.
Yeah. And when you talk about the management of said things, there's so many moving parts to it. Just on the capital side of things, I've got 2 foresters that manage our territory for large capital projects. Then we have our long-term projects. I've got one forester that manages it, but he has a team of cuffs that help him out between work planning and identifying, managing the tree crews as well. We have 7 district foresters. Each one of those have a team of, whether it's a planner or a cuff, to help him out. And we've recently transitioned to, I have a senior cuff that is managing our work planning team. So rather than each district have their own planning staff or production planning, we call it, I've got one guy who's their sole focus is to identify the work ahead of all the tree crews so I can get estimates, pricing, all that stuff. They don't get distracted by customer complaints or any of that stuff. Identify the work. And now I can put together bid packages or expectations for tree crews and cycles and those kind of things. So we do have it very, I'd like to say we have it pretty organized. The team may say things can be a little disorganized at times, but from my perspective, I like everything to have their very specific roles, because if everybody's doing everything, it's hard to track. It's hard for me to manage those things.
Yeah. Oh, no, very good.
So is your routine tree work on a cycle?
4-year cycle, yeah.
4-year cycle.
Okay.
And you're, if I recall, you have an herbicide program that you've sort of been innovating.
We have a significant herbicide program, I would say. We probably spend more percentage-wise than most utilities. We're right about 40% of our budget is invested in herbicide. We are, because of some, I would say, budgetary restrictions in the past, we had fallen behind our cycle the way we would want it done. So we're kind of in a reclamation mode. And the best way to do that, cheapest way to do that, I would say the most cost-effective way would be to get those lines controlled through herbicide. And a lot of that's going to be in rural areas, rural communities, where there's long distances between houses and those kind of things, but it's a high density of, ditch trees, trees along the fence line, those kind of things. So if we can get those controlled with herbicide, it really allows us to focus more saw work in the cities and the rural or urban areas. The other thing I think we do that is significantly different than maybe some of the other utilities out there is our TGR program. We TGR a lot. We spend a significant amount of money getting TGR in those trees to lengthen the trim needs, the time between trims. We have a very robust TGR and basal program. Because in the metro areas, it just makes sense. I need to either slow the growth of the trees or push them back somehow. And for the cost per unit, TGR is just a lot cheaper than bringing a bunch of saws. That's my O&M dollars. So I'm allowed. I guess we can get away with doing that because of the way we're doing capital work, where we're doing a lot of our saw work on the cycle, but it's capitalized because of those programs. TGR gives me the time that I need to get that all into place. So
clearly, like you guys have a pretty organized process and program, and you've got a game plan, and you're mapping to that. Talk to us a little bit about maybe some of the specific challenges with the regional footprint that you have, whether that's tornado related, storm related, or just topography, or like what are the one or two things that keep you up at night in terms of like keeping things moving, but that do keep you nervous?
Well, we do live in Oklahoma, and this is hands down the most storm prone state I've ever lived in. And a storm event here is a very significant event. I mean, you're talking 70, 80 mile an hour winds that's another day in Oklahoma, it seems like. So we can be traversing right along and everything is going along fine. And then we have a tornado event, and that puts everybody at a standstill, and we all go focus on that. And that disrupts the flow. But because we have everybody with their specific roles, we can pick them up, put them into the storm response, get that done, and we jump right back to our normal routine. Our ICS processes, I think, are probably the most refined because we do it a lot. I remember being on utilities before, and we would always have these practice runs, like we're going to practice a catastrophic event, and we don't talk about that here because we're doing this all the time.
You're living it, yeah.
Yeah.
How many storms have you had this year?
Yeah.
I think we have 17 on the board, ICS events.
Since the first of the year.
Since the first of the year, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
We're constantly monitoring. Okay, when did this event start and stop? And we're trying to make sure that we're tracking all of that stuff to really know when customer tickets are going to up and down, and it's pretty wild. But yeah, it is very storm prone, and so we have a variety of regions across Oklahoma. You're talking very wet, tall pine stuff on the east, because we do have some in Arkansas as well. So we go clear out to Ozark, east of Fort Smith. And then we go all the way to Woodward and Beaver in the far west of Oklahoma, which is pretty near desert out there. There's not a lot of vegetation that goes on out there. So that's helpful to us because a lot of those miles we manage differently as a result of the fact that it's not a high density of trees, and we can focus on the ones over in the east. But it definitely presents itself as challenges. We did have, and that's one thing I think people, if you're not utilizing them, I don't know how a lot of people manage their storms, but we manage our storms, a lot of them through our CAD system, ticket dispatching and stuff. But we use our cuffs to help our foresters disseminate the information and manage the tree crews. So no one forester is having to manage an entire district. He's got a team of people that are supporting him or her, and they're able to oversee that operation in the district as opposed to being mired down with, managing it at a granular level. I think it's decentralized command is what the military uses. With my Marine Corps background kind of leads me towards, I love chain of command. I love those structures. And when it comes to, scalability on emergency response, if your process isn't scalable, it's a failed process, because at some point in time, you're going to stress that process. And so we developed a real good process of saying, if I need 100 crews or if I need 10 crews, this process works. It's just a matter of scaling up that chain of command. And everybody's able to make decisions, because we're all working off the same playbook. So
switching gears a little bit, going back to where this conversation started, you kind of took us through the journey of your career and now how you've ended up at a utility. The industry's changed a lot as it relates to education, technology. If you could talk to your younger self in today's environment, and if you were just starting your career in this sector, what would you do differently, or how would you guide somebody who's coming into the industry now? Would you give them your blueprint in how you got here, or would you say this is how I would change it up, given that this is available to you now?
Whew, that's a good question. I'm gonna sidestep that one a little bit, but I'll get back to it. When I talk about building teams, and I look at the team that we've built here, I think Phil mentioned it earlier too, but everybody has such a different background. I have geologists on staff here. I have, GIS guys that are working as foresters, degrees, all various degrees. We have degreed foresters as well. And so there's no one path to get to where, a person could sit and manage a program. And I think that's very important to understand that, I've got guys that they never touched a saw in their life, and they came out of college and they got natural resources degree, and we taught them the industry, and now they're doing a really good job because they're passionate about the outdoors, and we can manage a lot of that canopy, right?
Right.
But for myself, if I was to go back and, here comes, I started at the company. I started with Right Tree Service. I started with them because I needed a job to get me to my next career. And I did not know that this was a career. And until the vegetation manager for Mid-American Energy at the time was Jim Puentes. And he went through and he said, I'm done paying bottom dollar for these guys. I'm going to pay them good money. And I got a 25% raise within 3 months of being hired. And I was like, hold on. Now, what's the opportunity here, Ro? So I think what I would tell myself is be patient, but also learn everything you possibly can. And, just had some good people in my career helping me along, whether it was Will Nutter with Right Tree Service, and all the managers at that company that I was working with at the time that helped me get to where I needed to go. We laugh because there's a gentleman by the name of Phil Hines who was my division manager of when I was with working for ComEd over there for Right Tree Service. And, he provided me my sensitivity training is what we called it. But he was a Vietnam vet. Like he was a rough and tumble guy, but, he taught me a lot about managing people, setting expectations. And, I really appreciated all the people in my career. So my goal is now to be that person for somebody else to help, help my team understand that if you want to do this, let me help you get there. And, but I wouldn't change anything I experienced because I enjoyed everything I experienced.
Oh, good.
But everybody has a different path to get there.
Yeah, certainly. And I definitely got to ask you this before we start to wind down the discussion, but
sure.
I know you're not from Oklahoma, correct?
No.
But have you had to pick a side yet? OU, OSU?
Oh, within a week.
So where did you land?
All right. I gotta look around, see who's
looking around.
Yes.
So, again, because of who I am, I'm going to tell you something before I answer your question. I grew up in Iowa City.
Okay.
So the University of Iowa. That's where I graduated high school from there. But I grew up watching very fanatical people rooting for that team.
Right.
And it was, I didn't enjoy it. Every time Iowa State would come to play Iowa, I would root for Iowa State. Not because I was an Iowa State fan, but I was anti-establishmentarianism, right? So I became an Iowa State fan as a result of the fact that I just kept rooting for them. Next thing you know, they're good at basketball. So I'm like, okay, well, I guess I'm a basketball fan, whatever.
Yeah.
So I come here.
Yeah.
Fast forward, 50 years, and I come here to OG&E, and I walk into the vegetation department, and there's a gentleman that's was our clerk at the time, and he said, "Listen, you're going to have to choose." I'm like, what do you mean I'm going to have to choose? He goes, OSU or OU. And I'm looking at his cubicle, and it is full of OU stuff.
Yeah.
And I said, well, if you're going to make me choose, I'm choosing OSU.
There we go. I like it.
Ever since then, I'm just like, and my father-in-law, he graduated OSU. My wife, she's originally from Oklahoma, but she lived in Texas most of her life. But we have connection here.
That's a great story.
Yeah, my father-in-law's father owned a drilling company. It was weird. He had just a very small drilling company up by Enid. So it was interesting that we ended up back in Oklahoma for my wife. So.
Oh yeah, that's I loved your disposition. You're like, I'm anti-establishment. So what's everybody else doing? I'm taking the other side. I love it.
That's right.
I love it. Right. Contrarian thinking. I love it.
Yes.
I love it. Well, Shawn, this was a very enlightening conversation. I think this may be the first conversation that we've had since we started this podcast where, we've spent a bulk of the time talking about the flow of dollars and the optimization of, this, how to think about the different buckets and optimizing and watching somebody lead something, working with the different stakeholders and building a program like this. It's congratulations. Like, it sounds like you've got a really good a really good path, and we really appreciate you making some time today for us. And,
well, I appreciate you guys inviting me on here, and I enjoyed it very much, and our battle's not done, so we will keep fighting. So
absolutely, absolutely. And every time I watch Oklahoma football now, I definitely. I know exactly where you stand, so that'll be fun to watch. So, thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you. Thanks, Shawn. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. You guys have a good day.
That's it for this episode of Trees and Lines, brought to you by Iapetus Holdings. If you like the show, please give us a 5-star rating on Apple or Spotify. If you have any questions or comments on any of our episodes or ideas for topics or guests, we'd love to hear from you. Please contact us at treesandlines@iapetusllc.com. We'll chat with you soon.